And welcome back to The Recap, the video podcast of First Baptist Kettering, where we discuss topics such as our vision, our values, and our sermons from week to week. The Recap exists to help us be transformed by Jesus. So with that, let's get started.
Welcome back. We are around the table with Pastor Patrick and Pastor David here to talk about this wonderful chapter in Genesis that we preached on Sunday, or that you guys preached on Sunday. I got to sit it out and take notes and worship. But we're looking at Abraham and Abimelech. Mm-hmm. And at first when I read this passage, I'm glad I'm not preaching it because it was a little tricky, I thought. But I thought both of you guys handled it super well. Let me just start with you, David. You preached this passage. What are some of the things that, man, you were like, this really spoke to my heart? I needed to hear this.
Well, I think the fact that, Abraham, we can all relate to him, and the fact that he has just made the same mistake here in chapter 20 that he made in chapter 12, 30 years earlier. The same mistake he made with Pharaoh, he's making now again with another king, another leader. Mm-hmm. And the fact that God still has his hand on him, still using him. I told you earlier, I think that truth resonated with the folks at Eastmont, with me personally in my study ahead of time.
So you're saying you've made the same mistake twice?
Yeah, actually more than that. And I think that's why the life of Abraham really touches us. I'll say this at the beginning. How I ended the sermon was that passage in 2 Timothy, I think 2:15, where he says, "When we are faithless, he remains faithful." Paul speaking to Timothy, and that. It's so true. It's been true in my life. Also, I'll just say this one other thing. The way Abraham's life, his faith, and in this case, his mistake, did something to Abimelech. It really resonated with him. We'll see it again later in chapter 21, halfway through. I know we're a couple of weeks out from that one, but he comes to Abraham, and now we've got a little bit more time has elapsed, and he says to Abraham, hey, God's blessed you, in so many words. God's blessed you, and they make that covenant, of course. So anyway, I'll let you answer that question.
So the beginning of that relationship is not great, right? I mean, and Abimelech's approach to Abraham, why did you do this to me? Like, why you brought this on me?
Disaster upon my family.
This is not fair. Like, what were you thinking? And to answer the question, Chad, from my seat, I think the middle part of that exchange with Abraham and Abimelech, you see God moving toward his people, right? Through someone that Abraham wouldn't expect to get held accountable for his actions. And he does that with us. I mean, he speaks, he pursues us, he's relentless. And we look back in Genesis 3 where God pursues Adam and Eve and he says, where are you? What have you done? Do you realize what the depth of that? And in 17 chapters, we get to Genesis 20, and Abraham does the same thing that Adam and Eve do. He makes excuses.
He blames God.
He blames God.
It's like, you caused me to leave my country, right? This is your fault, God.
And God led me to leave my father, and I was scared of this place, and all these things, and that's a model for the way we respond typically to accountability, and I was drawn into this reality that God's pursuit is a testimony of his grace toward people and him drawing us back. And that is actually a kindness of God, not just leaving us to our own devices, but he calls us to come to him. So I read Psalm 51, the whole passage, and really honed in on 51:17. And the posture of David after the encounter with Nathan and him being held accountable for his sin, it's not, I'm sorry, like, I'm sorry I got caught, but I know the depth of what I've done. That's the difference. It's not excuses, it's repentance. It's two different things. So I'm studying this passage thinking, what in the world am I going to say?
That's what I thought at first.
And God was like, boom,
good.
I'm pursuing people.
Yeah.
One of the things I was thinking about as I was listening to you preach, going back to that idea of here Abimelech is receiving this punishment or this awful set of circumstances surrounding him, and he hasn't done anything wrong. But that's what sin does. Like, we've all have experienced the pain of sin, even if it wasn't our sin. Like the sin of a parent can impact the life of a child, right? Or if somebody goes out and gets drunk and drinks and drives and has an accident, like that person who they hit didn't do anything wrong.
They're a victim.
They may have been on their way home from church.
Mm-hmm.
They may have been doing all the right things, and somebody else's sin negatively impacts their life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way sin is. If we think to ourselves, well, it's only going to hurt me, we're foolish, because sin doesn't work that way. Sin always impacts everything around us. It destroys everything it touches. And so I was just thinking about how this poor guy, and we've all been there, like, why is this happening to me? I haven't done.
He said, "I'm walking." He said to God, and God agreed with him.
In integrity.
You have integrity.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing, and it shoots to the point. The main point, I think, is that our righteousness, our own good works, don't save us.
Nope.
And I think that's
exactly
really
right.
one of the big applications from this text, is that at the end of the text, at the end of this passage, he's still a pagan, unbelieving king. And even though he was walking in integrity, even though it wasn't him, but another point that I made that's really convicting, it's convicting when you get rebuked by an unbeliever.
Yes.
When a Christian gets rebuked by someone who is far from God, who doesn't believe God, that, man, I'm telling you right now, there is nothing more convicting for a believer, for somebody in the world to say, you're living like the devil.
You're a Christian?
Yeah.
Dude,
yeah.
And I think I alluded to that this way. Christians drive like that, like keep the fish off the back of your car.
Yeah.
That's what I talked about.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we've kind of hit all the way around is just this idea of progressive sanctification, right? That we see in the life of Abraham some highs and some lows, some moments where he's called the friend of God, right? He's been justified by his faith. He's willing to let his nephew Lot take the green space, and he's taken the tough. And then we find him lying and being deceitful and
right
so
human, being human.
Yeah. And
right
it's
after
just
God
a reminder.
says, "Hey, I'm going to fulfill my promise to you. In a year, you're going to have that baby."
Yeah.
You know? And then here he goes.
Yeah, and it's just
Here
a
I go.
reminder of that's the way it is in our Christian life, right? We're justified by faith, right? And so was Abraham. He was justified by faith. In that moment, that faith saved him. That's what we learned as we read through the New Testament, talking about Abraham in Romans. His faith is what saved him. But the moment he was saved, the moment he expressed his faith in God, was not the end. It was really just the beginning.
That's right.
And his life then has ups and downs, just like our lives have ups and downs.
And so many biblical characters like that too. If you look at the way the Bible is written, it brings these characters. I think of David being selected as king. The most unlikely, not selected by his father, wasn't even mentioned, right? He gets anointed king, and he's called a man after God's own heart, and sins in an egregious way. And he pens Psalm 51 after responding to the grace and the pursuit of God through the prophet. But not only that, Peter, who spent time with Jesus watching him heal and minister, and he denies him.
Yeah.
And then what happens in Peter's life? Jesus restores him.
Calls
But
him a
even
rock.
then, even then, Peter gets confronted by Paul.
Yeah.
Because he was doing some things that weren't on top shelf.
Yep.
And he had to be corrected. And that's the thing about the Christian walk, is that we need people in our lives who will bring correction and rebuke. Anybody who isolates themselves so much that they can't listen to anybody speak truth into their life is in a dangerous place. And that's why the church is so important, right? That we need each other to encourage one another, to challenge one another, to rebuke one another, so that we can walk faithfully with Christ for the long haul.
That old saying, sin grows in isolation. When we remove ourselves from the body of Christ, whatever that looks like. I'm just thinking the pursuit of perfection, right? This idea that I'm going to arrive perfectly sinless at any point in my life. Man, perfection is experienced in the presence of Jesus one day.
Yeah.
Whenever that day comes for us. Until then, we have to lean into our relationship through faith with Him and let Him work
with Him
us.
and with each other.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and that kind of moves to one of the measures we haven't really talked a lot about in this series. We because Faith Walker kind of seems to be the one that floats
Dominates.
to the surface. Yeah. But real life.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, here we really see that measure, and I think you always challenge us to try to find that as we're preaching in the text. And sometimes there's more than one, but here we have, I think, the fact that he's being a real lifer. He's made mistakes. He's sinned. And then I think we're going to see even more with this relationship of how it impacted that relationship. I mean, he becomes, I think, a friend with Abimelech, and there's a covenant that's made. And he actually, Abraham is doing it with him.
You're preaching my whole
I'm
sermon.
sorry. I'm so sorry. But I just love it because it does speak to that relationship.
The other side. It's the other part of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the important. It's not that this sermon this week wasn't important, but it's a portion of how God is working.
Yeah.
That's what we're preaching through.
Yeah. That's good.
Well, that's a great way to hop off of this and talk about this Sunday, where we'll pick that story back up and see how God continues to work in the life of Abraham and Sarah. And so it'll be an exciting time. So I hope you'll join us on Sunday, either in person or online. And I hope you'll go out this week and be the church. Have a great afternoon.